Hello and welcome to Conversations with Kid Care Canada. Today we have two guests. Our first guest is Dr. Andrew McNabb and our second guest will be Miss Shelley Cardinal. Today's topic is nurturing and how it contributes to social and emotional development. So Andrew, thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.
We've asked each of our guests to start off by telling us a key message that they would like all viewers to hear and understand. So have you had a chance to think about what your key message might be?
What I would like parents to know is that the early months and years of life are an extraordinary opportunity for them to have a positive impact on their child's future development. The exchanges, the actions, the interactions between parents and their infant should really be like a duet or a dance, where the child makes a movement, a smile, an action, which triggers in the parents a response, which again goes back to the baby to positively reinforce what he or she has signaled. And in that way, the parents are in fact helping the child learn both speech, visual cues, touch, emotion, and they are really sowing the seeds of who that baby will become in future life.
So I really love your idea of it being a dance or a duet, and we're going to come back to that. But first, what I'd love to do is let people know a little bit more about who you are.
Sure.
You are a pediatrician who has spent a lot of time in that role. You are also the lead pediatrician for Kid Care Canada. You're a researcher. I know that you're a distinguished scholar, and there are so many other things. But what would you like viewers to know about you?
I'd like them to know that I'm a parent also. A parent and a grandparent, and also a spouse in a blended family. All of those roles have provided me opportunities to see how wonderful the early interaction can be to help children's development, and also made me realize that there are special situations where parents may not necessarily have the knowledge or skills that equips them to respond, to join in the dance with their infant. And what Kid Care Canada does so well is it makes the everyday actions, the simple everyday things that we can do with our infants and children, clear to parents so that they can see them as constructive.
So what kind of everyday actions?
Well, it really is everything. Some parents feel that they have to do elaborate things with their children, but just the visual contact, the sound of your voice, a time where you are bathing your baby, feeding your baby, reading to a toddler, playing with their toys. Those are all part of this process where the child makes an action, you respond, and that pathway for them to learn and imprint and develop who they are is activated in a positive way.
Now, I've heard you talk about the absolute importance of, even during pregnancy and from birth, of being able to do that kind of serve and return with a baby. Why is it so important to do that early on?
It's because in the early months of life, the baby's brain is developing, they're growing physically, but they're also really learning how to be people, how to interpret emotions, how to really process sounds, visual cues, touch, experience. And they really have to practice. They have to play the tune, dance the dance, work through them to find out what they like, what works for them.
So this might be a good time to take a look at what Dr. Tom Boyce has to say about that.
Sure.
We have the video that we're going to show, Early Experiences Last a Lifetime.
It's important to hold, talk to, and touch babies. especially young children, are absorbing in those first few years of life all of these varieties of experience. And we know that their brains, the circuitry in their brains, the architecture of their brains, are really built sort of from the ground up. And these early relationships of interacting with their mother and their father, being touched, being spoken to, being read to, all of these experiences fundamentally affect the growth and the maturation of circuitry, of connections within the brain that then last a lifetime. So the child's ability to learn, to develop relationships, to respond to the world in a variety of ways are really built from these early experiences of what we think of as kind of serve and return, of this two-way street between a parent and a baby or a young child. The question of how much can be redeemed in a baby's life later on is a somewhat complicated question. On the one hand, we really do know from the findings in neuroscience and child development over the last 20 or 30 years that there are what we call critical periods. There are points in development where children's brains are more susceptible to the effect of the experiences that they're having. And these are kind of like open windows in which experiences can come in and positively affect their development that then influence their well-being and health for the remainder of their life. So there definitely are these early critical and sensitive periods where the effect of the environment, the effect of nurturing relationships are more profound than they are for the remainder of life. Having said that, however, I think we're also learning from neuroscience and fields like epigenetics that it's not that all is lost if something doesn't happen early in life, or if there's an absence of supportive, nurturing relationships for a period of time in early life. We're learning, for example, that new neurons and new connections between neurons in the brain can be developed on into adult life, even into midlife and beyond. So it's sort of a two-part message of the importance of those early years and the importance of sort of getting it right from the start. But on the other hand, I think a message of hope for those who haven't had those experiences, that all is not lost and that we can regain some of those experiences later in life.
So Andrew, what stands out for you from that video?
I think it's that the science behind the study of children matches what we know from what parents tell us, that these opportunities are there. Some of us have not experienced being cared for in this way, and therefore we need to learn from things like the Kid Care Canada materials, the everyday things we can do that make a difference. And as Tom says, really the earlier you start, the more you are mindful of making these things happen, the better it is for what you can contribute to your baby's development.
So what are some of the things that could get in the way of a parent being able to just sing to their baby, talk to their baby, play with their baby?
Goodness, it's really the chaos that most of us have to cope with in our lives. We're pulled in so many directions. It's not that here am I, here's the baby, and the afternoon is empty. You have a spouse, you have other children, you have a job, the phone goes. The stresses and the chaos in life are considerable. But the important thing to remember is that it only takes a moment. It only takes a moment to respond to the child, to smile back, to say something soothing, to give them a toy, and to realize that finding the time to do that within the busyness of a day can happen. and then to try and set some times aside. The time you bathe your baby can be a magic time for singing, touching, one-on-one care. Feeding, going to bed, reading, finding those little moments.
You mentioned earlier that some people had not had a positive experience when they were children, and then this has an impact on them when they become parents. Is that...
This is true, and in fact, going back generationally even further, fathers, for instance, didn't understand that they had a role to play in the development of their children. And now, again, because parents have been busy or for cultural reasons, some parents didn't really experience the nurture and the care that we know is such a profound platform for future development. So they haven't got a reference point until they learn, again, these everyday things make a difference and can make it a priority.
Now, you mentioned the role of community to me, and you said that parents don't have to do it alone. What were you meaning there?
Well, again, you know, I have talked to many parents, obviously, and they say, well, you know, I can't do everything, and nobody expects you to. Child care is, or used to be anyway, a community activity. The village brings up and makes the child. So rely on friends, people you love, people you trust, other family members, good friends in the community. Share your child and your child's development with them, and everyone benefits.
Are there advantages for children to have more than one important adult in their life?
Well, grandparents, obviously I'm speaking for myself, but grandparents are terribly important. They bring a slightly different dimension, maybe a little more tolerance.
We have to wrap it up now, Andrew. I'm so sorry, but thank you very much for this, and I know we'll have you on again.
Great pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be back in a few minutes.
A child's early years are foundational for lifelong mental and physical health. Kid Care Canada Society is a charitable organization incorporated in the province of British Columbia. We seek to empower families to raise their children to be socially and emotionally healthy, and ensure families and those who support them have easy access to relevant, current research at no cost to the end user. Our appealing videos, now being captioned in various languages, feature world-renowned experts and real families. To access these videos and other free resources, log on to kidcarecanada.org.
Welcome back to Conversations with Kid Care Canada Society. Today we're talking about social and emotional development, and we're especially going to be talking about it this afternoon with Indigenous peoples, because our guest is Shelley Cardinal, the National Indigenous Advisor for the Red Cross. Welcome, Shelley. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And you wanted to acknowledge the territories that we're on.
I do, yeah. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Lekwungen and the Sinchothan speaking people's territory. I've lived on this territory for many years. I've been a guest on this territory for 30 years, and much of my work has been here. So yeah, so I'd like to begin that way.
Thank you. One of the things we've been doing in this series is asking each guest to give us a key message right off the top. So what would be a key message you'd like to share?
For me, one of my key messages when we really look at nurturing our babies and our children that are welcomed into our communities is that is the critical need to look at belonging and to look at connecting, to acknowledge identity, and to really recognize those things in creating safe environments. Yeah.
So, first of all, before we move into unpacking all of those really interesting things, I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself. What has brought you to this
to this work.
To this work. And
To this place. I often really acknowledge that I'm a tricultural person. You know, on my paternal side, I'm Cree First Nations. My Kokam is Tall Cree, and my Moochum is Big Stone Cree. On my mother's side, I'm from a traditional sect of the Mennonite community called Halderman Mennonite. And I grew up in between those two cultures and learning about Canadian culture at the same time as being a very strong part of my two strong cultures. And so I had this unique upbringing. And in that, I've always actually felt a real connection to wondering more and wanting to know more about who I am as an Indigenous person. So my initial exploration was a lot in the area of child development, and that brought me into social work and then education. And then it brought me to the Red Cross, and it brought me to the Respect Education program that focuses on violence prevention and educating around creating healthy spaces and healthy and safe communities. So that really, I had a fit there. For me, that felt like it was a big fit in the concentration on not just child development, but educating around that.
So you mentioned that belonging, connecting, checking your identity, and safe environments are really important to you in understanding what's happening in Indigenous peoples and with yourself.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. You know, one thing that's really unique in our Indigenous communities, and that really ties Indigenous communities together around the world, is that Indigenous communities are child-centered communities. It's one thing that we have in common, and being child-centered communities means that just that role of nurturing, that role of developing healthy and strong and resilient little babies and then children is critical in helping that pathway towards wellness that we want.
I know you also want to talk about some of the challenges, and could you just give us a very brief overview at this time, and then hopefully after looking at the video we're going to be watching in a minute, then you'll be able to tell us a bit more.
Yeah, you know, one of there's been some real critical disruptions for Indigenous people that have happened through time that have really placed a barrier to being able to nurture in the way that we traditionally nurtured, that really have placed a barrier to connecting and to learning about identity in the way that we traditionally did. And so one of the things that's happening in a great way within our communities is we're learning about those disruptions. We're learning more about the disruption of the residential school system. We're learning more about the disruption of the child welfare system, of the 60s scoop, of how justice has played a role in the disconnection of our communities as opposed to the connection of our communities. And we've learned a great deal about how those disruptions are disrupting where we are today in terms of the connection that we're making with our children.
This is very helpful to understand, and it really takes away any sense of blame or fault. It's really an understanding of history.
Yes.
And I know that you would like to speak a little bit more about that, but I think we're going to be going now to take a look at a trailer from the video, Emotional Safety.
Great.
I know you've looked at the full movie video. Is there something you want us to especially look for just in this trailer?
What I really like in this trailer is that the trailer is, you know, one thing that's really important in our communities is modeling and mentoring. And what this shows us is it shows us what nurturing looks like. You know, sometimes when we forget or maybe we don't know altogether what something looks like or how to do something, the best way forward is to see how that's modeled. To see how to, if somebody can mentor us into a behavior, that mentoring and that modeling can create the behavior, and sometimes it's the feelings that come after. And that's okay. And this video is a really, really good example of what that looks like.
Well, we're going to take a look at it right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emotional safety means your child feels loved, nurtured, special, and safe. And as you will see and hear, babies who experience early loving relationships have a better chance for lifelong health and happiness.
The baby's born and it must stay with mother. And it stays with mother on mother's skin. Mother's skin is different to the skin on the rest of her body, and it's designed to be the place where a baby's born. All the mother has to do is just hold her baby and love her baby.
Babies can sense anxiety in their surroundings, so trying to be calm and enjoy them is a very positive way of reinforcing good feelings for them.
We know that adversity can fundamentally change the development of the child's biology, the circuitry in the brain, can change even the immune system, can change the way that the body's metabolism is regulated.
You changed my life.
Make us better. Yes, you make us better.
A lot of the things that your great-grandmother did and your great-great-great-grandmother did are what babies need. They need what you're doing now. They need touch.
I was going to high school, and then I found out I was pregnant. It was really hard to push myself to go back to school because I was just really scared for what everybody would say. I was young, and I was going to be a single mom.
Babies are really at risk from even the most loving parents of having an inappropriate reaction by the parent. And the worst thing, that can happen is the baby gets shaken or something, and you can cause permanent brain damage or even death by a strong shake. And you wouldn't think that a loving parent could possibly do this to a child, but anybody can get exhausted, anybody can get frustrated by too much crying.
It's a tremendous period of joy. I would say don't let your anxiety inhibit the joy or suppress the joy, if you will. Trust your instincts and be as gentle and as present as possible.
No!
You can't spoil a baby with love.
She's my pride and joy. My little world right here.
So you've spoken about the importance of connecting, of identity, of creating safe environments, of belonging. What happens when there are deficits?
When there's deficits, those deficits can create all kinds of disruptions in the relationship and in the ability to fully develop the relationship and to fully support the relationship. In the bigger picture, we're all social beings, and that's how we start, and that's who we are in this world. And what's critical is that babies come into this world, and they come in, and we need to actually teach them to be those social beings. And so when there's deficits, what happens is that there's an inability. There's an inability to actually to do that maybe in a positive way.
That serve and return that Andrew was talking about.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
We're going to be wrapping up soon, but the good news is that we're going to have a much fuller conversation on our website thanks to you.
Great.
I want to thank you ever so much for coming.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Estelle. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to further discussions.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you with us for future conversations with Kick Your Canada.